through side 1 and 2 of the first tape, so that's exciting. I guess you're ready to hear a little bit more, but first there's a couple things I want to bring back up as far as things I liked to do when I was a kid. Now we're talking little kid here because I do remember having a sandbox, and it was a great thing to play in that sandbox. And mine was a pretty good size. It was something like 4 by 4, about the size you kids had when you were little. I had one of those, and I believe it was up on legs, so there was, it was fun to walk around at stomach height and playing the darn thing. And then there was a sandbox behind me. Denny Wolf had one. Jeff, my next door neighbor, had one. Don Graham had one across the street, and so did Kenny Wise, 2 doors over to the north. So a lot of times we'd take turns on a day-to-day basis, or even several times a day, just going back and forth and playing in the sand. The big thing was, back then, the little toy army soldiers, and they were rubber, some were tin, and you could get, jeeps and tanks and all that good stuff and create a little war on a dirt hill or in a sandbox or wherever. And so I used to have quite a collection of those until the lawnmower waged war with them, because I left them lay around too much, and ended up I didn't have any. So that's the way they went. But another thing I do remember was my mom. We would a lot of times play in a dirt pile or something, and occasionally we had a dirt pile next to our house for whatever reason, extra dirt for flower beds or so forth. And we also had a little garden over to that side of the house on the north side, and there were always little garden spiders in there, and actually some of them weren't so little, and I liked to collect them. I mean, I don't know if I'd do anything exciting with them, but they ended up dying, and then I'd have a dead spider. But I always remember my mom catching them for me, because I was just a little bit afraid to catch them. They had pretty long legs. They were real pretty, yellow and black. And so every time I saw one and wanted it, I'd go get her to put it in the jar for me. And she was pretty good at it. Another thing I remember, when we were real little, someone, Aunt June, I believe, sent us a children's family Bible for Christmas. And Dad used to read stories out of that to us in the evenings. And I do remember that, and I still have that Bible in the bookcase to this day. And also, when we went over to Vrana's, and as we were eating over Grandma Vrana's, eating supper or something, I would oftentimes be watching TV, sitting on a footstool that I have today in our living room. And I salvaged that from the bits and pieces of things that were left from their house when it was broken up. Mom had that footstool in the basement for a lot of years, and I thought it had my name on it, so I have it. Now, I guess we'll get started with the rest of the book on page 72. List one special memory about each of your brothers and sisters. So I guess that would be 2, since I had one of each. Let's see. I remember when Joyce and I oftentimes would wash the car on the south side of the house. There was room to get a car through there into the backyard if you needed to, and that's where we pulled the car to wash it. And she was able to drive it at that point, and I was almost able to drive it at that point. So, it was kind of a big deal, washing the car and taking care of it, and we did it together. And of course, now and then somebody would get wet when they didn't want to. But it was a pretty good time, and one that happened at least a couple times a year, I guess. And as far as my brother, I remember once again a lot of things. It's hard to pick out just one of anybody. But one time, when he was home on leave, I think I was out in the backyard. It was in the summer, and I started to squirt him with the hose. And I was squirting with the hose, and of course he didn't like that. And he wrestled the hose away from me, and he was pointing it at me. And then I didn't like that. So I slowly started to, I knotted the hose, I think, and then at that point slowly started to loosen my grip, thinking that he still had it knotted somewhere to where I wouldn't get wet, but he didn't. And so I slowly loosened my grip on the knotted hose, and I wasn't getting wet, so then I let it go all the way. Well, he wasn't holding it anywhere, and I got the full force of water, which is what I deserved after squirting him. But I thought he was giving me a break, and he didn't, and rightly so. So that's one particular time, and there were others, but there's only room on this page to write just that one. So I better go on to the next question. If I were to find an old toy box up in the attic, what toys would I remember most fondly and why? I wouldn't mind finding a couple of my old toy guns. They were pretty neat, and a few of them were gifts from different people that I remember, and I think that would be a nice way to remember them. After all, toy guns today on the open market go at a pretty good premium. I found one like I used to have, at an old flea market, and it was in a broken down condition, and I paid $5 for it, and I had it restored for about $170. And I know that sounds crazy, but I think it was a good investment. And it's a nice looking toy. It's a good collector's item today, and it reminds me of some good times. I would also find a plastic traffic light that I got for Christmas one year, and it had a battery in it, and therefore powered the flashing red, green, and yellow lights on it. And there was one of these at an auction at Les Clus's brother's farm with a train set. And let's see, it went with the train set, which was also the kind I used to have. And I was bidding on it, and I found out that Larry and his son were bidding on it, which is Les Clus's son. So I decided to quit bidding and let them go ahead and have it. But it would have been a nice thing to have, since I used to have one just like it, the traffic light and the train set. How old was I when I understood that God loved me, and how did that affect me? I don't really know. I guess I was a lot younger. However, I'm reminded oftentimes during any given week that he does, because of the stupid mistakes I make, and just some of the things I do, and some of the things I almost do and don't do. But I know that it's true, and it makes a difference in my life, and it should make more of a difference. But I'm learning. What the heck, I'm only 53. I think I have a little more time to put it together. Describe a time in your life when God led you in an unusual way. Well, that would probably be the time that I decided to marry your mother, or ask her to marry me. You think she was different. You think she is different now. You should have seen her when I met her. And for some reason, I saw a lot of good in her, because I think she was so naive and so sheltered that she didn't know any bad. And I don't know if that's bad or good, but I think I certainly was driven or led or blindsided or something. But fact remains, we got married, and I guess we're doing okay with that. What kind of car did your family drive? Were you proud of it or embarrassed by it? We had cars that were not too old. We would occasionally buy a car in the model year. We had a 62 Bonneville, and we had a 57 Pontiac, and before that, I don't know, we had I think a 52 Chevy. And, you know, it was in the time frame, and we certainly weren't embarrassed at all by them. And they were pretty good cars, so there was not a problem there. Did I ever go to a dance? Tell me about it. Well, of course, I went to a dance in junior high, prior to junior high, late elementary school. There were dance classes offered at an evening session at an elementary school, and I went to dance class, and of course you learn how to dance. It's kind of like a prep school, crash course in prep school for kids to learn how to dance before they get up into junior high and so forth. And it was no big deal. I learned how to jitterbug and learn how to dance. And I remember one night we had our grand dance, and I got in trouble, or this girl and I got in trouble, got yelled at for dancing cheek to cheek because we kind of liked each other. Sandy Foychter, a girl I mentioned earlier from my childhood, I guess, who lived down Baldwin Street, was taking lessons too. And I think we were in the 5th grade at that time, whatever age that puts us at, 10, 11, 12, whatever. And so the Mrs. York, the dance teacher, yelled at us and told us to break it up and go dance with somebody else because they weren't supposed to be dancing cheek to cheek. So we grew immediate attention from our peers, and you know, got ribbed a little bit about it and so forth. But it was no big deal. As a matter of fact, it was that next summer, I think, when I was selling magazines, it just so happened I knocked on Mrs. York's door to try and sell her some magazines in Cleveland. I didn't know she lived there. You didn't even know she lived in Cleveland. But she remembered me and said, "You were the one that, you know, I reprimanded dancing cheek to cheek at the dance class. You're the Starn kid." And I said, "Yeah, I guess so, but by the way, I'm here to talk to you about some of these magazines. Would you be interested?" So I changed the subject, and I don't know, but she might have been one of the sales I made. How often did we go to church or Sunday school? We tried to go every Sunday as a kid. Didn't always make it, but most of the time there for a while, Sunday morning, you know, it was our Chinese fire drill to get to church, and that's about as far as we took it. We never really went to Bible school or anything like that. I didn't go to Bible school until I joined in my high school years, till I was in the Church of Christ, and they had Bible school Wednesday night and Sunday, Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, and there was a service in there somewhere also. So that's when I did go to some Bible study classes. And then later, after Barb and I were married, we joined a Bible study group for adults, and we went to somebody's house I think it was every other week on a Sunday for some Bible study. And we met some really good people when we lived in Springfield, Missouri, doing that. Did your family attend any family reunions? Okay. Tell me about them. Favorite cousins, aunts, uncles. Oh boy. Well, let's see. Uncle Ralph. He's still alive to this day, and he's probably about 78 or 80 something, and he flew in the Second World War. He was shot down 3 times. He was a pilot in the B-17. And Uncle Jerry, he's passed away. These are my mom's brothers. He's passed away. He was a merchant marine, and also, I believe he was in the Army over in Korea for a while when Korea was flaring up. Uncle Ralph did carry with him a knife that my dad made, and Uncle Ralph gave me that knife back a few years ago. But my dad made him a knife. My dad, I guess, liked to make knives when he was a young man, and he made pretty good knives. They were long, hunting kind of knives, and he made one for Uncle Ralph to carry during the war in case he needed it. And Ralph said one of the days he was shot down, he was floating in the raft. He didn't bring that knife with him that day. He says if he would have lost it, because he kept it in his boot, and of course his pant leg was out of his boot and everything else, and so I'm sure the knife wouldn't have fared very well. So anyway, I have that knife to this day. And talking with Bill, my cousin, I guess Dad made a knife for Jim also, because Jim, who was one of the co-owners for a while with Starn Tool and Die, he also was in the war. He was in the Army, and he was a ground pounder, and I guess a really shit and get kind of guy. He was a platoon leader or something. Anyway, he had one of these knives also, and Bill still has that knife, and it's in his office, sitting up on his credenza or cabinet or whatever he calls that thing that he puts stuff on. And it's a pretty neat item, and I'm kind of glad my dad had the talent to make those. I never knew that until my uncles started telling me about these things. But anyway, those are some of them. There's Uncle Gleason, who started Starn Tool. He was the oldest brother of my dad's, and then came Clarence, and then came my dad, and then came Jim, the youngest. And cousins, Leslie and Buzzy and Vicky from Ralph and Helen, my mom's brother, and Jeff and Robin had passed away from Uncle Jerry, from his family. Then there's just Scott and Kelly left, and I believe they're living in Texas now. And the uncles and cousins on my dad's side are Bill and Susan, and let's see, Wesley, and there's several others in there that I should be more familiar with, but I'm not. And Joyce probably has a better handle on who's who in that arena than I do. When did you go to a funeral, and how did it affect you? Well, probably the first funeral I went to was my grandfather's, and I I don't know, it was kind of a strange thing. There he was, looking like he was okay and would sit up and start breathing, but he just didn't do it. He was a bit cold, and I knew he wasn't going to sit up and start breathing. But my mom had gone to several funerals, and I would see her prior to her going, and I'd ask her where she's going that day, all dressed up, and she would bellow out another funeral and be crying and everything. So I just got the general idea that funerals just weren't that great a thing, and I didn't really want to be going to them in any capacity. So that was my first impression, I guess, when I would ask her, when she was crying, what's the matter, and she was all dressed up, and pretty much knew that she was going to another funeral. One of her older family members or something had passed away. And next question is, if you had brothers and sisters, did you feel your parents treated all of you the same? And I did. I didn't feel that any of us got treated special at all. I think we were treated each according to our age. Some of the older ones, when Danny and Joyce were older than me, they had privileges. And of course, I wish I could do some of those things, but I couldn't because I wasn't old enough. And I think that's right. That's the way we treated our kids. The older one got to do a little bit more because when you're older, you can do more, and you should be able to do more. Now, I'm not talking chores, of course. God forbid anybody do more chores than they needed to do. But as far as privileges and things like that, this question asks, how did you like your high school and college days, and what interested you the most? And as far as education, what interested me the most was getting out of it. And when I did go to college, it was after the military, so I went on a GI Bill. And the classes that they arranged for the ex-servicemen, I think, were primarily focused on fleecing the money out of them, so they weren't real tough. Of course, as a study, I did take psychology because it was the only one that interested me. English and history, I'm sorry, I just didn't have a clue, and I just wasn't interested. But psychology did interest me, and I took that, and I did fairly well with it. I think I got some pretty good grades. I got some B's and so forth. And the main thing, though, is I think when we got our checks every month of about $600 or so, I think the school got to keep about half of that, or maybe slightly more. But the school was a good thing. It did help me, and I don't regret going. I think I should have probably gone longer and gone to a regular 2-year, 4-year program. If you learn to play a musical instrument, tell me your memories of lessons, practice, and your music teacher. I tried playing the cornet in high school, and we didn't get along, the cornet and I, so that didn't last very long. It lasted about a week, maybe 2. And then later on, actually that was in high school, that was when the 5th grade, when you start learning to play an instrument, 5th or 6th grade. And then shortly after that, I started taking guitar lessons, and a friend of mine was taking guitar lessons from a fellow. And so Jerry Walters and I were taking them together, not at the same time, but from the same person. Old Doc Searles was his name. And he had a patch over his eye, and he, was an old-looking bald guy. He was 50-something then. I imagine he's probably a lot older by now. But this was back, in the 6th, 7th, 8th grade area. And let's see, Jerry and myself and Henry and Martin and Billy Smith, at one point had a little band formed, I think, Billy was the drummer. Or no, there were four of us on guitars, and then we borrowed a drummer from another band. And it was back when I think WHK Roadshow was in effect, and there were small bands going around in a circuit, playing in different places, looking for notoriety. And it was a neat way to provide a band for an organization at a low cost in the community of Cleveland and surrounding communities. And we were in a band, we made up a band, and we had a few decent songs, and we played one night. It was kind of funny. The Gray kids, who were older kids, lived a couple houses away from me, were in a band. And they were in this roadshow deal, and they had a booking, I think, at Olmsted Falls High School. And so we were supposed to play there with them one night. They had us in as guests. And so we played a couple songs, I guess. And it was really funny because I didn't pay attention to the audience, but they tell me that they went wild. You know, we were four crazy little kids trying to be cool, and we had fun. Mrs. Marting made sure that we all looked alike and we all dressed the same, and our hair was all combed and our shirts were tucked in and all that good stuff. And we had a really good time with it, and probably should have pursued it. I think Jerry did for a little while in his college years, or shortly thereafter. I think he was still in some kind of band or another, a bass player. But I didn't pursue it, and I don't think any of the others did. But it was a fun thing, and maybe something that we should have pursued a little bit. What were your youthful goals and ambitions for your life, and which ones were you able to fulfill? Well, that's interesting. When I think of some, I guess I should write them down and see if I can get them fulfilled in the time I have left. I don't know. I guess growing up, I wasn't taught from a school of goals and ambitions. I was a little kid, and little pictures at that time should be seen and not heard, according to my mother. And so, my opinion didn't matter. And in even worse cases, I'm not sure that I had an opinion of a lot of things. So I kind of just went with the program and took what was dished out and said, yes, sir, and yes, ma'am, and thank you, and things like that. And as a result, perhaps I've missed some things in life. I didn't set any real goals early on, and wasn't taught to do that. Nobody knew to teach me that. And so at that point, I guess I fell a little bit short. How old were you when you met Mom, and what attracted her to you, or you to her? Either way. Well, you'd have to ask her about the other. Well, I was just out of the Navy. No, I was just in the Navy. And actually, my mother was in the hospital having surgery, some minor surgery, I guess. How about that? And she was her nurse, and she liked her. And of course, as mothers do, they look out for their sons, and asked her if she was dating anybody, and she said no, and asked if she would write my son, and she says, well, if he writes me first. So that was a pretty spunky answer, I guess. So she told me a little bit about her. She told her she looked like Marlo Thomas, that girl on TV. And so that was pretty interesting. I thought Marlo Thomas wasn't bad looking. Come to find out, she's not bad looking by any stretch, but she certainly didn't look like Marlo Thomas. And we dated a little bit. She tried to feed me pasta on our first date, and I should have known something was up, since I'm not a pasta fan. And to this day, I'm not a pasta fan, and she still eats that pasta. But anyway, I guess the thing that attracted me about her was she was a sincere, honest person, and she didn't seem to be blemished by a lot of the world's ways of doing things, courting, dating. She didn't use abusive language, and she was just a nice, good, clean-cut kid. She was, awful sheltered and naive in some ways, to the point of I would look and say, "What did you say? What did you mean by that?" But I don't know. We're still working on that, and I think she'll get it someday. But for the most part, just her honesty and sincerity is what attracted me to her. When did you know that Mom was the only one and only for you? And how did you know? Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I felt that way about her, and I knew it was time for me to, I knew it was time for me to settle down, because most everybody I knew settled down, after they got out of the service, settled down, started a family. I mean, it's just the natural progression of things, unlike today when there is no natural progression of things. So I was just kind of falling into the great scheme of human development, I guess. But anyway, I was doing what I thought was the right thing, and I guess it was the right thing. But I went and talked to my dad about her, and he said she's a really nice girl, and you seem to get along good with her, and she likes you, and you could do a whole lot worse. And that's a quote from good old Fred. And so with that quote in mind, I could do a whole lot worse. I tended to agree with that, because I knew there was a whole lot worse out there, and I didn't want any part of a whole lot worse. So I guess I thought that Mom would be just fine, and I guess I was right. Share a memory about how you proposed to Mom. Well, I guess how it really happened was I knew I was going to be transferred to Springfield, and it was Springfield, Missouri, and she thought it was Springfield, Ohio. And so I said, "Well, do you want to move to Springfield with me?" And I think we were in the Kmart in Middleburg at the time. "Would you like to move to Springfield with me?" And she says, "Well, it's only Springfield, Ohio. It's not far away." I said, "No, it's Springfield, Missouri. Would you want to get married?" And she was walking around looking at a coat or something at the coat rack, and I think she said yes. And so I don't know if she saw a coat that she wanted and figured she'd get it that way, or she would have said it without looking at the coats. But anyway, that was the time and the place. Tell me about your wedding day. What happened? How did you feel? Were you nervous, scared, happy? Yeah, I was nervous, scared, happy. And I felt also on that day. Springfield, Missouri. She decided to move there, and so we were going to go ahead and get married. It was my mom and dad. Her mom and dad couldn't make it, and there were a couple other folks that we knew, and had them stand up for us as, not our best men, because my dad was basically my best man. And I wish I could remember their names, those other people. But anyway, Ramser, Charlotte, and I don't know, Ramser, Mr. Ramser, Bob Ramser. My memory's going, that's the first thing to go, I guess. So there were 6 people at our wedding, and we arranged for candle holders, rented the candle holders, and rented the church, which at that time I don't think it was but a few bucks, and rented the preacher's time in the Church of Christ, where I started to go to church after I moved there. And Actually, the priest, I don't remember his name, but I know Mom does. Mom remembers the name. I'm sure it's written down on a certificate. The preacher the Church of Christ preacher that married us. But after that, we went to Riverside Inn outside of Springfield and ate, and I paid for everything. And I think the whole thing wasn't over $200-300, and we were happily married. And it was the purest and simplest way that I felt was the best way to start our relationship. Excuse me, the best way we felt to start our relationship. So at that time we didn't have a lot of friends that we felt would want to come to a wedding, or that we wanted to come to our wedding. And so the best thing to do is just to keep it small, because it was out of state and far away. It was going to be small, so everything seemed to work out quite well, I thought. Where did you go on a honeymoon? Describe the most humorous thing that happened. Well, we really didn't have a honeymoon, and we just kind of got up and went to work the next day, and that was okay by me. I think that a lot of that stuff is more than it's cracked up to be, especially after I hear Joyce talk about Shelley's honeymoon, Shelley and Scott's. I'm glad they got married. I'm happy for them, but I guess they had a real heck of a time in Mexico, getting their connections and getting their room and so forth after it was all prearranged. And I guess they spent a little bit more money than they wanted to. So going by that, and going by the fact that anybody that's ever planned a wedding or a honeymoon has always had things go wrong, I didn't want to deal with that. So that's another reason why we had a small wedding and probably didn't do the honeymoon thing at that time. Do you remember the first meals Mom cooked for you? Do you dare comment on them? Well, there was a couple that were in question. And I think that might be part of the reason why we got a dog, to kind of, give it to the dog first and see if Netta would eat it. And if she did, she didn't fall over, then maybe we'd give it a try. Well, obviously, I'm kidding. But there were a couple meals that were really in question. And one in particular, you'll have to ask Mom what it was. I still don't remember. But it was some kind of casserole. And I think it went bad, I'm not sure. Describe where you and Mom lived after you got married. What was the view like from the kitchen window? We lived on Elm Street in Springfield, Missouri. And it was a small little house with a narrow, long lot. And out the back window, there was probably about 100 foot to the fence line, and it was probably about 50 feet wide, and the garage was to the right. You could see the garage, and back behind the garage was a patch of grass that I never cut, that the city told me I better start cutting or they were going to fine me. And I think what that was it was real rough, because it used to be a garden and it was hard to get the mower in there, so I didn't cut it. Next to us were the Cochrans, Arch and Paula. They were an older couple that they're both in a nursing home now, if not passed away by now. They were great people. They adopted us. They found an old high chair in their attic and wanted to know if we wanted it. And so we took it and we finished it, and that was the kids' high chair. And we still have it up in the attic at this house just because that was the high chair. And that's about it. The neighbors on the other side changed frequently, so we never really got to know either set of those too much. But it was a nice little place to live, and we lived there for, 6-8 months before we bought our house. Here's a picture in the picture frame with a lot of smaller pictures where we're on the front steps holding a rake and a broom, I guess. And that was one of our move-in pictures. We just moved in and had Arch, I think, take a picture of us standing there like the old couple holding a rake and a pitchfork. Well, we had a broom and a mop or something like that in our hands in that picture. When did you and Mom start talking about having children? Why did you want children, or did you want children? Yeah, I think that was the intent of getting married. I think that's what we wanted to do. We thought right away about having some children because that's what everybody else did, what we were supposed to do, but it's also what we wanted to do. So that's what we decided to do. And we got pregnant and pretty soon had Heather. And Heather was born we had already moved to the new house on Whitman. And she came home to that house, I believe, because we had fixed up the nursery, a bedroom into a nursery that we knew she'd like. If you'd go anywhere in the world on a second honeymoon, where would you go and why? Yeah, I would probably go anywhere in the world on a second honeymoon, and just because I could. I don't know, I don't have any place in particular. I thought it'd be nice to go to the Holy Lands. I wouldn't mind going to Africa, back to Australia. That would be fun. I don't know as if I'd want to go to Alaska. I hear the scenery's beautiful, but if you take a package tour, you can often get stuck with a bunch of blue hairs, and they're slow-moving blue hairs. That would be old people. And that wouldn't all be that much fun. So, once again, hey, just throw up the options and I'll pick one. What do you love best about Mom now? I would have to say it's still her honesty. And I think that's why she's done so well in her nursing profession, her honesty and integrity. And those are the reasons why we decided to get married, and I think those are still the same reasons that we are married today. Describe the most fun you've ever had on the 4th of July. We're on page 109, so we just might make it through today or in the near future. 4th of July. Oh boy. I really don't know. Probably a family picnic somewhere. One picnic is good as another as long as you have fun, and it was probably a 4th of July family picnic. The most interesting figure that you've ever met. What did this person help you learn about his or her culture? I guess today that would have to be my cousin Bill, who is my younger cousin Bill by 5 years, I think. But he took the tool trade that my Uncle Gleason started, his father bought from Gleason, and then Bill bought it, I guess about 10 years ago now, from his father. He took the tool trade by the horns, and he created a multifaceted business out of it, where he's got several small businesses working together towards a common goal, and that's to get Bill early retirement, which is nothing wrong with that. But in the meantime, I was able to get a job there, and I'm the buyer for Starn Tool, and I like my job. It's somewhat trying at times, but then that's why they call it a job, I guess. But Bill has to be probably one of the most interesting people I've met. He knows about a lot of things. He's a public figure here in the community. He's a good bullshitter. He's a philanthropist. He supports a lot of different functions within the community. And he's a good guy, and I'm pleased to know him more than just knowing of him as a cousin. He is a hard worker. He's got some good people working for him, and they like him. And that's an important thing when your employees like you. Because if they don't like you, they can cause you some real problems. Well, I'm sure in the past there's been a few, but they've made short work of those people. And pretty much everybody there is loyal to Starn Tool. They're good employees, and they think a lot of Bill, and Bill treats his employees real well. So I'm pleased to be a part of that. And once again, that's probably the most interesting person I know. And even though it doesn't sound like too much, I'm sure he's heads and shoulders above some of the people that are in great notoriety as far as a human being. I think he's got some values and a lot of class. Not to say he hasn't made mistakes along the way, but then, mistakes are kind of a benchmark. And you bump away from them and you continue on. So without the mistakes, the trials and errors, you don't know really how successful you are. This would be the end of side 1 on the second tape. So we're going to start side 2 here on the second tape just as soon as we reach the very end of this one. Thanks again for your time, and take a potty break if you'd like.